We thought you'd prefer the small room, less sunlight for someone your age," Celine said, not looking up from her phone. The words hung in the air like sea mist, thin, dismissive, impossible to grasp, but impossible to ignore. I stood in the doorway of the master bedroom, where only days before I'd left my suitcase, my hairbrush on the nightstand, my journal tucked beneath the pillow. Now, the bedding had changed. My things were gone. In their place, Celine's monogrammed silk robe, her travel-sized skincare jars lined like soldiers on the dresser, a bottle of Cabernet breathing on the side table. My heart thudded, but I smiled anyway. Did something happen to my room? Kieran appeared behind her holding 2 mugs of coffee. One for Celine, none for me. He hesitated at the threshold, then gestured down the hall. "We figured the blue room would be more comfortable," he said. "It's cooler at night." "It's smaller," I replied, keeping my voice even. Celine finally looked up, her face all pleasant concern. "The sun is brutal in the mornings, Corliss. You said last time it gave you headaches." I said, "I like the sun in the mornings," I corrected, still standing, not moving. Celine shrugged with a quick, apologetic smile, already swiping again on her screen. "It's just a temporary shift. We needed more room to set up the projector for Kieran's Zooms." "The master bedroom isn't an office," I said. Now, Kieran's eyes met mine. For a second, I thought I saw guilt flash across his face. Real guilt, not that polite discomfort he usually wore when Celine took control. But he said nothing. Not about my bags, not about the closet she'd claimed, not about the new white rug she'd put in that I'd never approved. I walked past them both without another word down the hall to the smaller bedroom, the blue room. It still smelled faintly of salt and lemon from the last time I'd stayed, but something else, too, emptiness. Someone had folded the blankets into tight, crisp hospital corners. My clothes were in the closet, but my shoes had been stuffed into a plastic tote at the foot of the bed. On the dresser sat a single note in Celine's looping handwriting. "Thought you'd appreciate a quieter space. Love, S." No one asked me. I placed my bag on the bed and stared out the window. The ocean was still there, relentless, constant, but even it looked different now, as if the horizon had shifted slightly, tilting everything off balance. This house wasn't just a summer home. It was the culmination of 30 years of sacrifice, of working double shifts at Glenwood, of skipping vacations, of patching clothes instead of replacing them. The foundation had been laid with scrimped savings, the beams painted by my own hands. I'd pulled up carpet myself, replaced windows, rebuilt the deck that now hosted Celine's yoga mat every morning. And now I was a guest. Dinner that evening was grilled halibut with arugula and goat cheese salad. Celine served herself first. Kieran offered to open a bottle of red. "This place is coming together," she said, glancing around the dining room. "With just a few more upgrades, I think we'll be ready to host those strategy retreats I mentioned. Maybe even corporate dinners during conference season." "We," she kept saying we. I excused myself early, the taste of vinegar still on my tongue. The morning after the bedroom incident, I found a rolled-up set of architectural plans waiting for me at the breakfast table. Kieran was already poring over them, his hair still damp from a shower. Celine standing behind him, with her ever-present tablet in hand. "You're up early," I said, reaching for the coffee pot. "We wanted to show you something," Celine replied, tapping the screen. "You're going to love it." Kieran unrolled the plans with a wide sweep of his arms. The paper smelled of ink and fresh ambition. "This is what we've been working on," he said, eyes bright. A full second-story addition, expanded deck, kitchen reconfiguration with open flow, imagine it. Mom glass doors opening to the water, natural light everywhere. I looked at the sketches. Sleek lines, modern angles, nothing like the quiet charm I had spent years nurturing into the cottage. The new design was bold, but it didn't breathe the same air. It looked like something out of a catalog, beautiful but impersonal. "I thought you liked the house the way it is," I said softly. Kieran hesitated, glancing at Celine. It's beautiful, she said quickly. But this could be so much more. It could be something. A proper investment. A showpiece. She turned her tablet toward me. Mock-ups filled the screen, imported fixtures. Scandinavian cabinetry quartz countertops, all layered over photos of the cottage I had bought with my own hands, my own sweat. We've already spoken to a contractor. Ballpark's around $150,000, but that includes everything, permits, materials, full oversight. $150,000, I repeated slower this time. Kieran nodded. We've saved about 25Ks already, maybe a little more by the time construction starts. We're not asking for a handout, Mom. We want to partner with you on this. Partner, I echoed. Celine stepped in, her tone smooth and practiced. This is our home. We all love it. We all use it. It makes sense to invest together. You'd still hold majority ownership, of course. We'd just formalize a joint interest. I folded my hands in my lap. Something about the way she said formalize sent a ripple of warning through my chest. When you say joint interest, I began. Do you mean legal? It's just paperwork, she said quickly. A formality. You'd still have final say. But it's only fair since we're contributing financially and improving the value of our home. Our home. Kieran avoided my eyes then, just studied the plans, tracing his finger along the proposed second floor like a child imagining a treehouse. Let me think about it, I said at last. It's a significant amount of money. I need time. Of course, Celine said with a tight smile. Just remember, properties like this are skyrocketing. If we wait too long, we'll miss the window. She rolled the plans back up, but not before sliding a copy into my tote bag, as if she expected I'd come around once I saw the numbers in the light of day. I spent the rest of the afternoon on the deck with my coffee, staring out at the water. No plans. No tablets. Just the sound of the tide rolling in steady and unchanging. I'd worked half my life for this piece. I wasn't ready to see it carved up and sold back to me as a vision. That night, I locked my bedroom door for the first time in years. I waited 3 days before bringing it up. Kieran was in the backyard replacing a cracked deck board, while Celine sat under the awning, phone in hand, barely glancing up. I've thought about the renovation, I said, standing beside him, arms crossed against the sea breeze. It's a beautiful design. Truly. But I'm not comfortable with that kind of expense, especially not this close to retirement. Kieran's hammer paused mid-swing. Okay, he said, slowly, nodding once. We figured you'd need time. I'm happy to update the kitchen appliances, I added, trying to keep my voice warm. Maybe retile the bathroom, fix the trim in the guest room. Things that make sense without losing what makes this place feel like home. From the deck, Celine's head lifted. So, no second story, I turned toward her. No second story. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Of course. It's your call. Kieran cleared his throat and returned to the deckboard without a word. They left that evening. Earlier than planned. No excuses, just a shared glance between them, a quiet gathering of their bags, and the sound of Selene's heels fading down the front steps. For weeks after the house was quiet again. Too quiet. I tried to believe the distance was coincidence. Celine's promotion, Kieran's deadlines, life pulling us all in different directions. But deep down, I knew better. When your children stop calling, it's rarely because they're too busy. It's because they've already decided you've said the wrong thing. The house became my own again, but not in the way I wanted. No laughter echoing from the kitchen. No clinking of glasses on the deck. Just silence, thick and unwelcome. I sent texts. Invitations. Come for the weekend, weather's perfect. Or made that lemon cod you like, Kieran. One-word replies. Delays. Maybe next month. Celine has a client dinner. The kids at the firm are swamped. The real answer was never spoken. It didn't have to be. I had chosen the house over them. At least that's how Celine saw it. I replaced the oven myself one Saturday, wiping dust from the counter between deep breaths. Took down the peeling wallpaper in the guest bathroom, added a few new rugs, moved my mother's painting to the entryway. Small things, things that felt like me. I stopped asking when they'd visit next. And that's when the other shift began, subtle but clear. Celine no longer called it our place in passing conversation. She referred to it as your beach house when speaking to others. My house. A decision she had wanted to share in now turned into a boundary. But it wasn't respect I felt behind her phrasing. It was distance. Cold. Clinical. Like a realtor walking through someone else's listing. That winter, they didn't visit once, and when spring arrived, it wasn't Kieran who called. It was Celine. Her voice sugar-wrapped and clipped. "We're thinking of listing it," she said, as if she had any say. I let the silence stretch long before answering. "You're thinking of listing what exactly?" "Our house," she said again. The word laced with just enough venom to let me know she still believed it. I didn't respond, not yet. Instead, I walked to the window, pulled back the curtain, and stared out at the porch I'd painted myself. Still solid. Still mine. The silence between us deepened, and I realized whatever came next would change everything. It started with a flutter, just a strange tick in my chest when I bent down to tie my shoe. I thought it was nothing. Just fatigue, maybe the stress of being alone in a house that used to hold more voices than just mine. But then the flutter turned into a jolt. My heart skipped like a missed step, and for a second, I saw black. By the time I made it to Dr. Connolly's office, my pulse was erratic, my breathing shallow. He sent me for a battery of tests. EKG, blood work, an overnight monitor I wore like a badge of aging. A week later, the diagnosis came back: atrial fibrillation. "Manageable," Dr. Connolly said, tapping the screen gently. "But serious. You'll need medication, strict adherence to the schedule. Missing a dose could mean complications, stroke most notably." I nodded, like I understood it all, though I felt like someone had pulled the floor out from under me. He gave me the prescriptions. I went to the pharmacy. I blinked at the price. Even with my insurance, the monthly cost was almost $400. The woman behind the counter offered to run it again, as if maybe the numbers were wrong. But they weren't. I didn't tell Kieran right away. I didn't want my condition to be a conversation point at some dinner party where Celine would sigh and mention Mom's declining health between bites of imported cheese. But eventually, I had to. He called one night just after 9. For once, his voice was soft. "Celine," he said, "you've been quiet," he began. "Everything okay?" I was going to wait, I admitted. "But there's no sense in that. I've been diagnosed with AFib. Started medication last week." He was quiet. "Then, Jesus, Mom, why didn't you say something sooner?" I smiled at the question. "Because you would have worried." "Well, yeah," he said, and his voice cracked just enough for me to picture his face, creased with concern, mouth tight. "You're okay, though. The meds are working." "They are, but they're costly. Do you need help?" The question was instinctive, kind, but I hesitated. "No," I said. "Not yet." The next morning, a fruit basket arrived at my apartment. Oversized, glossy, arranged like something in a magazine. A small card tucked beneath the cellophane read, "Thinking of you. Let us know if we can do anything. Celine and Kieran." It wasn't handwritten. Still, I took it as a gesture. I rearranged my budget. No more weekend getaways. I clipped coupons again like I had in my 30s. Switched to instant coffee. No more dinners out with Margot unless they were early bird specials with split entrees. The pills came in 2 bottles, one for the morning, one for the night. I bought a weekly organizer from the pharmacy, blue and plastic, with the days printed in white. I placed it on my bathroom counter beside the hand lotion and lavender soap. A silent reminder that my body was changing. I started walking the beach again. Slowly, deliberately, Each step a small promise that I wasn't giving in. Celine called a week later. Her voice was warm, almost soft. Kieran said you've been managing everything on your own. I have. Well, she said you're strong as always. But her tone had an edge I couldn't quite name. Something clipped. Almost rehearsed. She shifted the conversation to other things, her work. Kieran's firm. The market conditions. I listened. But I wasn't really there. Something had shifted between us too. A current I couldn't yet name. That weekend, I went to the beach house alone. I brought my pills. And when I opened the door, the master bedroom smelled faintly of her perfume. The next time Celine called, she didn't ask how I was doing. She launched straight into it, voice bright, like a TV anchor reading good news. So, I've been thinking, she said about the beach house. It's such a beautiful place, and honestly, it's just sitting there during the week. I already knew where this was going, but I let her finish. I spoke with a colleague of mine who manages luxury vacation rentals. He says Pelican properties like yours can go for $4,000, even $5,000 a week during peak season. I shifted the phone to my other ear. It's not a hotel, Celine. No, of course not. But think of the income it would more than cover your meds, your rent. You wouldn't even have to lift a finger. Dexter could manage everything. I stared at the wall of my apartment blank, except for a framed photo of the beach house from the first week I bought it, when the siding was still cracked and the railing leaned like an old man's cane. I'd taken the photo just after fixing the door frame with my own 2 hands. It's not about money, I said. It's about peace. Celine laughed lightly. Peace can be expensive, Corliss. I don't want strangers sleeping in my bed, or opening drawers where I keep letters. I don't want someone rinsing sand off their feet in the shower, I tiled myself. She was quiet for a moment. Then, you could always lock up your personal things, or use the smaller room for yourself when you visit. It doesn't have to feel like a sacrifice. It already does, I said. There was a pause. We only want what's best for you. But she said I was no longer included in the equation. After the call, I sat in the silence of my living room. My hand lingered on my pill organizer. I hadn't missed a single dose since the diagnosis, but my heart felt off-kilter all the same. I drove out to the beach house 2 days later. Alone. The second I turned the key in the lock, I felt this strange sense of trespassing in my own space. I opened the door to find Celine's favorite throw blanket draped over my reading chair. A bottle of mineral water I never drank sat on the kitchen counter. There was nothing overtly disrespectful, but the message was clear. They were comfortable here, too. Comfortable. Comfortable enough to believe it was theirs. That evening, I walked the beach as the tide came in and the sun hung low and red over the water. I passed a couple with 2 children, the youngest trailing a plastic shovel. Their laughter stirred something in me I couldn't name. Back inside, I made myself a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table with my phone. I stared at the lock, old rusted around the edges. I searched for a local locksmith and found 3 nearby. I saved one to my contacts and typed out a message. Hi, I'd like to inquire about changing locks for a private residence. I didn't hit send. Not yet. Instead, I pressed the phone to my chest and closed my eyes. The sound of the waves filtered through the windows, soft but persistent. By morning, Celine would already be texting again, offering spreadsheets, sample listings, the name of another trusted property manager. But I knew what I needed to do. I just wasn't ready to make it official. Not yet. I told myself it was about reconnecting, that after months of strained phone calls and polite distance, we needed a weekend together, just the 3 of us. No pressure. A reset. That was the word I used when I invited them. Let's reset, I said to Kieran, and he'd sounded almost relieved when he agreed. Celine, of course, followed up with questions. What were the sleeping arrangements? Could they bring a few work items? I said yes to all of it. I was determined to keep things smooth. I arrived at the house early Friday morning with a grocery bag in each arm. I stocked the fridge with Celine's favorites, sparkling water with lime oat milk, creamer, imported soft cheeses, and wiped down every surface until it shone. The house already looked spotless, but I still smoothed the bedspreads and fluffed the couch pillows like I was expecting strangers. I even bought a bottle of that Cabernet she'd mentioned once in passing. It wasn't cheap. I don't even drink anymore, not since the diagnosis, but I thought she might appreciate the gesture. As I stood in the wine aisle, I told myself this is what people do when they're trying, when they want peace. The guest room was prepared for Kieran. I laid out fresh towels and tucked a note under his pillow. Welcome home. Love, Mom. I wasn't sure if he'd find it sweet or awkward. Probably both. I set the dining table for 3, lit a small vanilla candle, and even folded the cloth napkins. It looked like the kind of evening I used to dream about when I first bought this place. Family dinners, quiet laughter, no tension, thick enough to choke on. They arrived just after sunset. Kieran, first his arms full of bags. Celine followed behind, dressed in her usual weekend chic loose linen gold earrings, a scarf wrapped just so around her neck. Smells amazing in here, she said, glancing around. Did you get the place staged for a showing? I smiled. Just thought I'd make it nice. Her eyes landed on the wine, and she tilted her head. Is this the Bordeaux I told you about, Cabernet? I said. Hope it's the right one. Kieran leaned over and kissed my cheek. Thanks for doing all this, Mom. Dinner was pleasant, if a little rehearsed. We talked about the firm's recent expansion, Celine's client dinner at some rooftop place in the city, and Kieran's upcoming architecture feature in a small magazine. I asked questions, nodded in the right places, and didn't mention the beach house once. After we cleared the table, Celine offered to help with the dishes. I accepted mostly for the novelty of it. She stood beside me at the sink, drying as I washed. For a brief moment, it almost felt like something normal. Almost. You really put a lot into this weekend, she said. Thank you. Her tone was even, but I caught the edge underneath, like gratitude laced with calculation. I just wanted us to enjoy the place, I replied. She looked around. It really is beautiful here. Shame it sits empty most of the time. There it was, the opening. I didn't respond, just kept washing. That night, I lay awake for a long time, listening to the house settle, the wind brushing against the windows. I heard footsteps once light, quick headed toward the kitchen, then silence. In the morning, I woke early as always and went to take my medication. The pill organizer wasn't on the bathroom counter. I stood in the bathroom staring at the empty space where my pill organizer had been. I checked the drawer, the medicine cabinet, the linen closet. Nothing. I knew where I'd placed it. I always did. Same spot every night, right on the counter beside the sink. I'd taken my evening dose only hours ago. I retraced my steps to the kitchen, trying to keep my breathing even. Maybe I'd moved it without thinking. Maybe I was tired. But I wasn't tired. I was alert, focused, and worried. Celine was already at the dining table, her laptop open and her coffee steaming. She looked up and offered a quick smile. Morning, Corliss. Coffee's fresh. I'm looking for my medication, I said. She paused, one hand hovering over the keyboard. The blue container with the little compartments, I nodded. I moved it last night to make space for my skincare, she said easily. Check the drawer next to the sink. I did. Nothing. Only extra dish towels. It's not there, I said, returning to the kitchen. Her brow furrowed like I'd asked her to solve a complex riddle. That's strange. I'm sure I put it there. I opened every drawer and cabinet in the kitchen, every shelf, every surface. Then I moved to the living room. Nothing. I specifically remember placing it on the bathroom counter, I said. It was full. She shrugged lightly. Maybe you moved them somewhere else and forgot people misplace things all the time. My heart was pounding, not from fear, but from something colder. Anger. No, they were on the counter last night. I saw them before I went to bed. She looked up, then expression cool. Are you suggesting I threw away your pills? I'm saying they're gone, and you were the only other person up last night. She tilted her head. I understand you're upset, but maybe it's just stress. You've been forgetful lately. Kieran mentioned it. I wanted to scream. Instead, I walked out the back door and headed to the outdoor garbage bin. My hands shook as I lifted the lid. And there, under a layer of paper towels and a wine cork, I saw it. My blue pill organizer. Empty. I held it like proof in a trial. Every compartment opened. Every dose gone. I brought it inside and placed it on the table in front of her. Found it. Selene didn't flinch. That's unfortunate. But you can't prove I did anything. I don't need to prove anything. I know what happened. She leaned back, eyes narrowing just slightly. Maybe we should talk about other ways to manage your condition. Pharmaceuticals aren't the only solution. My wellness consultant, Selene? I said, my voice low and steady. If you ever interfere with my medication again, I will call the police. The room fell silent. Kieran appeared in the doorway just then, rubbing sleep from his eyes. What's going on? I turned to him. Your mother's heart medication was found in the outside trash. Empty. He looked between us, unsure who to believe. That doesn't make sense. It does, I said, if someone wanted me out of this house. Selene stood, her hands lifting in a gesture of mock surrender. I'm not doing this drama, Corliss. If you want to accuse people of crimes without proof, that's your choice. But I won't be a part of it. She walked toward the hallway, her coffee in hand. I looked at Kieran. His face was blank, unreadable. I need a pharmacy, I said, grabbing my purse. Now. The pharmacy tech hesitated when I handed over the empty pill organizer. I could see the questions forming behind her polite smile. I don't have a refill scheduled, I said, trying to sound calm. But I've missed a dose. I need an emergency supply. She nodded and disappeared into the back. The wait felt endless. I stared at a rack of greeting cards, wondering how many other people in that building were choosing sympathy cards, while someone they loved was quietly being erased by those closest to them. Eventually, she returned with 6 pills. 3 days' worth, she said. It'll be $178 out of pocket. I didn't flinch. I handed over my card, signed the slip, and walked out, gripping the small white bag like a lifeline. Kieran was still behind the wheel, waiting with the engine running. He didn't speak as I slid back into the seat, and I didn't offer anything. Not yet. We drove back in silence, the ocean view blurring past. As soon as I stepped inside the house, I went straight to the guest room, no longer mine in any way, and called Margot. She answered on the second ring. Hey, stranger. Thought you were off the grid this weekend. I need your help, I said. Voice tight. Something's wrong. I told her everything from the missing pills to the empty container in the trash. From Celine's practiced indifference to the pharmacy receipt, now crumpled in my purse. There was a long pause on her end. Then she said, That's not a misunderstanding, Corliss. That's targeted. I sat on the edge of the bed. She's trying to drive me out. Of my own house. Why money? Control. Maybe even jealousy, I don't know. But today was different. Today wasn't just cruel. It was dangerous. Do you feel safe staying there tonight? I swallowed hard. The question hit me like cold air. No, I said. I don't feel safe. She exhaled sharply. You need to document everything. From this point forward. And Corliss? What happened today may qualify as elder endangerment. The word landed like a rock in my chest. I wasn't elderly. Not in my mind. But legally at nearly 60 and with a cardiac condition, maybe I checked the boxes. And Selene knew that. She'd been poking around the edges of that idea for months. Can you come stay with me for a night or two? Margot asked. Not yet, I said. First, I need to make sure they don't get the chance to do this again. I hung up, steadied myself, and walked back into the main room. Celine was nowhere in sight. Kieran was on the deck, staring out at the water, his arms folded tightly. He looked like a child again, one caught between a bully and a mother, unsure who he was supposed to protect. I passed by him without a word, went to the kitchen drawer, and pulled out the local business card I'd stashed there weeks ago. Locksmith, I dialed. This is Corliss Alden. I'd like to schedule a lock replacement. The man on the line asked me to confirm the address. Pelican Cove, white cedar cottage with blue shutters. I said, my voice steady. Kieran knocked softly on my door just after 10. I'd been awake since before sunrise, the bag from the pharmacy still sitting unopened on the nightstand. I told myself I wasn't avoiding taking the pill, I was just waiting for the right moment. Can we talk? He asked, voice low. I nodded. He stepped in but didn't sit. Just stood with his hands in his pockets, rocking slightly on his heels like he used to do when he was 10, and about to confess something. You were right, he said finally. I waited. I'd learned not to fill the silence for him. He exhaled through his nose and sat at the edge of the wicker chair near the window. Celine's fund, the investment thing she's been building, it collapsed 2 weeks ago. He didn't look at me, just out toward the ocean. She didn't want to tell anyone, not even me at first. She tried to patch it with a few moves, quick flips, private lending, but the numbers were too far gone. He rubbed his temples. There are whispers of lawsuits, complaints being filed. The firm's partners are distancing. I closed my eyes for a moment. And your condo. We leveraged it. Took out a second mortgage last year to invest in a property she was sure would turn. Meridian Heights. But the plumbing's a mess. 2 tenants skipped out, and the market softened. He finally met my eyes. We're bleeding, Mom. That's the truth. And the beach house. He hesitated. I waited. It was supposed to be a safety net, he admitted. We thought if we could just turn it into something, a rental, a corporate retreat, even collateral, it could buy us time. Keep us afloat until Celine finds her footing again? She threw away my heart medication, Kieran. My voice didn't rise, but it held weight. I can't believe she'd do that intentionally. I said nothing. He ran a hand through his hair. She sees the house as a family asset. She keeps saying that family should share, but I know it's not hers. Or mine, really. You bought it. You kept it up. It's yours. But you let her speak for both of you, I said gently. You let her move my things, paint over my walls, invite her colleagues here, as if I was just a tenant passing through. He looked small in the chair. I didn't want to fight with her. It was easier to pretend it didn't bother you. Well, it does, I said. And it should bother you too. Kieran's shoulders slumped. We made a mess, didn't we? I didn't answer. He stood up, lingered by the door. What are you going to do? I looked down at the pill in my palm, then back at him. I already called the locksmith. He gave a small nod. I'll help pay for it. No, I said. You won't. And then quietly, but I'd like you to come back when you're ready to talk to me, not for her, not for the house. Just me. He hesitated, then nodded again. I'd like that too. He left without asking about Celine. Maybe that was progress. I watched his car pull out of the gravel drive, taillights blinking red as he turned toward the city. When I locked the door behind him, I did it slowly with my key, only mine. Then I picked up the phone and called Margot. It's time I said. I want to know exactly what my rights are. Celine left just after dawn. No hug, no eye contact, no attempt at civility. Just the sound of her wheeled bag bumping across the old planks of the deck and the low hum of the black car service waiting outside. She had claimed it was a work emergency, a high-profile client demanding a weekend consult. But I'd seen the way she packed. Precise, rehearsed. Not the rushed flurry of someone scrambling out of obligation. She'd already decided to go before the weekend ever began. The house felt different once she left. Not quieter can be peaceful. This was something else. Hollow, maybe. Like it had exhaled after holding its breath for too long. I made coffee and stood at the window overlooking the sea, letting the early sun warm my face while the bitterness steadied me. The cabinet still smelled faintly of her perfume, sharp and sweet, like something masking rot. After I finished my cup, I pulled out the folder I'd started a few nights earlier. I began writing down everything, dates, conversations, little details I used to think weren't worth remembering. The pill organizer, the way she moved my belongings without asking, the renovation proposal, the fundraiser she wanted to host here for branding exposure. I labeled each entry careful and factual, not emotional, just the truth lined up plainly. Then I called a technician Margot had recommended. He came that afternoon in a plain gray van, introducing himself only as Al. No logos, no questions, just work boots, a clipboard, and quiet competence. By nightfall, there were 4 new cameras, 2 exterior, 2 inside. Discreet but thorough. The feed streamed directly to my phone, stored securely in the cloud. I didn't tell Kieran. I didn't tell anyone. I walked through each room afterward, checking the windows, straightening cushions, touching surfaces, like I was reacquainting myself with something that used to be mine and now was again. That evening, I cooked something simple, grilled vegetables, a piece of fish lemon over rice. The kind of dinner I used to make before everything got complicated, and I ate it on the deck alone, watching the tide roll in. The stars came out slowly, one by one. I stayed out there for hours, not out of fear, not out of defiance, but to remind myself what quiet really felt like. Not silence from being dismissed, not silence from walking on eggshells, just stillness. And I realized something as I sipped a second cup of coffee, now lukewarm. This wasn't Celine's house. It wasn't even Kieran's. It was mine. And if I wanted it to stay mine, I'd need to do more than write things down. I'd need to be ready. Because something told me she wasn't done. And when she came back, it wouldn't be with a suitcase. It would be with a plan. I stood, brushed the crumbs from my lap, and went inside to lock the door firmly twice. Then I opened the drawer and took out the folder again. There was more I needed to add. The envelope came midweek, slipped into my mailbox between a flyer for window tinting and a political campaign postcard. It was cream-colored and thick legal stationery, crisp and expensive. The return address wasn't Kieran and Celine's condo. It was a law office in the city. I didn't open it right away. I stood in my kitchen with it resting on the counter, watching the sun pour through the window while the hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. The house felt colder, not because of the weather. Eventually, I slit the envelope open with the corner of a butter knife and slid out the neatly folded letter. 2 pages. Perfect grammar. Professional tone. Dear Mrs. Corliss, Avery, it began. They always use your full name when they're about to ask for something you wouldn't give freely. The letter proposed what they called a collaborative family property arrangement. Celine and Kieran, though the voice behind the phrasing was unmistakably hers, offered to assume managerial responsibilities for the beach house. In exchange for what they called relieving the administrative burden, they wanted joint decision-making authority. They would handle bookings, upkeep, financial optimization. I'd retain majority ownership, but only on paper. The next paragraph was where the trap lay. It stated that in the event I became unable to manage independently, no definition provided Celine and Kieran would transition from co-managers to joint owners. It included language about health assessments, financial responsiveness, and a vague clause about sustained mental or physical decline. It read like a contract designed by someone who'd spent months planning how to legally slide my name off the deed without ever asking me to lift a pen. My first instinct was to crumple the pages and toss them in the trash. But I didn't. I called Margot, read the entire thing aloud over speakerphone. She didn't interrupt, just listened with the patience of someone who'd seen too many versions of the same story. When I finished, she let out a breath. "That's not a proposal," she said flatly. "That's a legal funnel." "What do you mean they're funneling control away from you under the pretense of support?" "If you sign that you've invited wolves into the pantry and handed them the key." She told me to make a copy and email it to her. "Do nothing until we speak in person," she added. "And keep the original." I folded the letter back up with deliberate care and slid it into a folder labeled simply House. By the time I looked up, an hour had passed. The sun had moved across the floor, and the coffee in my mug had gone cold. That night, I didn't sleep well. My mind kept looping back to the phrasing sustained mental or physical decline. It wasn't just a guess. It was a plan. A long game. I thought of the empty pill box in the trash, the locked drawer, where I now stored all my medication, and the app on my phone showing every camera view of my property. And I thought of how Celine had smiled when she said, "We thought you'd prefer the small room, less sunlight, for someone your age." The next morning I called the locksmith. The wait list had opened up. He could come that afternoon. I said yes without hesitation. By sunset, every key ever made for this house would be useless, except mine. Margot's contact. Amelia Dorsey looked exactly how I hoped an attorney would look: unshaken, practical, and unimpressed by people who played clever with paper. We met at her office in a converted Victorian near downtown Charleston, not far from the courthouse. She wore tortoiseshell glasses, no jewelry, and an expression that didn't change once while reading the letter Kieran and Celine had sent. She didn't rush, just flipped through each page, slowly reading every line, like she was slicing through a body on an operating table layer by careful layer. When she finished, she looked up. This, she said, tapping the signature line, is one of the most predatory family contracts I've seen in the last 5 years. Maybe 10. My breath caught. I'd known it was bad, but hearing it framed, that clearly made it more real, less personal, but somehow heavier. I've seen versions of this, she continued, from adult children trying to claim property through the back door. But they usually don't have the nerve to put it in writing this explicitly. She leaned back in her chair, folding her hands. "Let me guess. They said it was just to help you, just paperwork, just something to keep things clear." I nodded. She almost smiled. "It's always just protection, just oversight, just management, until you lose the house." Amelia explained what the contract truly meant. If I signed, I'd retain ownership in name, but they'd control access, revenue, renovations, and most concerning, determinations of my mental competence. The section about sustained decline was vague enough to trigger at their discretion and broad enough to challenge in court if I resisted. If you needed a medical procedure, say, or you forgot to pay a bill, they could interpret that as signs of incapacity, she said. Combine it with their offer to help manage your finances, and it's a perfect legal setup for them to assume control. "And the beach house?" I asked quietly. "You'd lose it," she said bluntly. "Eventually. The second you couldn't or didn't fight back." That word stuck in my ribs. Eventually. Because I could see how easily it could unfold: one bad fall, one delayed payment, one quiet week without answering their calls. That's all it would take. Then suddenly, I'd be the confused mother in the guest room watching strangers tour my own home under the label of vacation guests. "Don't sign anything," Amelia said. "Not even if they offer a revision. You'd be amazed how often these kinds of agreements come with a smile and a casserole dish." I nodded, swallowing the anger I hadn't even realized had built in my chest. "This is your only major asset?" she asked. I nodded again. "Then protect it like your life depends on it." Because in some ways, it does. I left her office with the folder still in hand and a pressure in my chest that felt oddly like relief. Not the light kind, but the heavy sort that follows a verdict you were bracing for and got anyway. On the drive home, I didn't call Kieran. I didn't text Celine. There would be no confrontation yet. No emails or messages or returned glances. Not yet. I needed to think, to prepare, because now I knew what they were willing to do, not in anger, not in conflict, but through calm, curated steps cloaked in professionalism. I parked by the beach house and watched the tide rising steadily. No more pretending this was a misunderstanding. I stepped inside and locked the door behind me. Tomorrow, I'd start putting boundaries in writing. Real ones, legal ones. It started with a phone call from Margot. "Have you seen the Examiner?" She asked, no greeting. Her voice was clipped. Front page, top fold. I hadn't. I was still sipping my morning coffee, looking out over the ocean and trying to remember what peace used to feel like. She texted me a photo a moment later. There was Celine, poised, composed, wearing one of her tailored ivory jackets, standing on the steps of her firm, with microphones pointed at her from every direction. The headline read, "Daughter-in-law speaks out on elder financial control." I didn't need to read the whole article. I knew exactly how she'd framed it before I saw the words. Still, I read. She's been struggling since her layoff. We tried to help with her finances, but she became suspicious, withdrawn. Then she cut off contact. It's heartbreaking to watch someone spiral like this. I sat very still. There was no direct accusation, no blatant lie that could be sued for. Just suggestion. Just framing. Just enough distance from the truth to slip under the radar and straight into the minds of anyone who didn't know better. They called it reverse elder abuse. She had painted herself as the concerned younger generation, trying to guide a struggling matriarch toward stability, only to be met with paranoia and hostility. I stared at the screen, rereading that line. Paranoia and hostility. That's what they were going to call boundaries now. That evening, acquaintances I hadn't spoken to in months began messaging me. Some were gentle concerned. Others were more direct. "Is everything okay? I saw the piece. Is it true what she said about your finances?" She just seemed so genuine. And she did. I couldn't deny that. Celine was good at this, too good. She had the voice, the posture, the careful pauses that made you believe she was reluctantly revealing something painful. I thought about how many times I had been silent to keep the peace, how many small cruelties I had let pass. Now they were calling that silence instability. I didn't reply to the messages. Not yet. Instead, I pulled out the folder I'd kept hidden in my file drawer behind old medical records and mortgage receipts. Inside were the documents I'd been collecting, a copy of the offer letter and my attorney's written statement on it, a signed note from my cardiologist confirming the necessity of my heart medication and the risk of missing doses, a photograph of my empty pill organizer in the trash. None of it was dramatic, but together, it painted a picture she couldn't whitewash with soft lighting and sound bites. I emailed Margot. "I think it's time we go public, too." Her reply was immediate. "Let's prepare it carefully. On your terms, not hers." The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table with the ocean light streaming in behind me. I wrote a statement. Not for the press, not yet. Just for myself. I am not irrational. I am not unstable. I am not confused. I am a woman who gave too much trust for too long and finally chose to draw a line. I saved the document under a simple name, Truth Draft 1. It was time to stop defending myself in whispers. The tide was turning, and this time I would not be swept away. It was just after 11 a.m. when my phone buzzed with a motion alert from the beach house. I had been reorganizing my kitchen pantry, trying to reclaim a sense of normalcy, when the app pinged and the familiar image of the front porch flickered to life on the screen. A man stood at my door. He wore a dark utility vest and held a clipboard. Even from the grainy still, I could see he was talking to someone just out of frame. His stance was too casual for a real, official, no badge, no insignia, but he gestured toward the door like he had a right to be there. I clicked into the live feed and turned up the audio. Fire inspection, he was saying. Just need access for about 20 minutes. A woman's voice cut in. She knows I scheduled this. I'm her daughter-in-law. I didn't need to see her face. I knew that voice. Celine. I felt something deep in my chest pull tight. The man looked unsure. There's a restraining order, he said. You sure we're cleared? We're working through it, she replied breezily. It's mostly a misunderstanding. She'll be glad we took care of this. I hit record on the app. Every second of it. The way he hesitated, the way she waved off legal orders like they were suggestions. She wasn't even trying to hide it. After a few more tense moments, the man stepped back. I'm not comfortable proceeding, he said. You'll need to get this cleared formally. Celine didn't argue. She turned toward her car phone already in hand, probably calling someone else to try again. I called the police. An officer arrived at the beach house within the hour. By then, Celine had already driven off, but I sent them the footage through the app, along with screenshots of the fake fire inspection text I'd received 2 days earlier. She's trying to get in through third parties, I explained to the officer over the phone, after I made it clear she's not allowed near the property. He was quiet for a moment. We see this more often than you'd think. Property disputes, especially family, can turn into full-blown harassment. You have a restraining order I'm filing today, I said. This is the line. And it was. I wasn't waiting for another pill container to disappear, or for some sudden paperwork to appear, claiming I was incapable of living alone. I drove straight to my attorney's office and signed the necessary documents. The footage, the false pretense of official inspection, the prior threats to my autonomy, it was enough. The restraining order was approved under emergency provision by that afternoon. Celine could no longer come within 100 feet of the property, nor could she contact me directly. Any further attempt to access the beach house would be considered a criminal offense. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was afraid, but because I was angry. Not loud or panicked, just a deep, smoldering kind of fury. The kind that comes when someone you've housed, fed, and trusted sends a stranger to quietly break open your door. I sat at the kitchen table and reviewed every camera angle again. Dexter Phillips, that was his name. Celine had mentioned him months ago. The man who helped friends and family manage luxury vacation rentals. Apparently now, he also made house calls under false pretenses. The next morning, I woke to another text, this one from Kieran. Saw the footage. I don't know what to say. I didn't respond. Not yet. Instead, I poured myself coffee, opened a new document, and started outlining what would come next. Because the moment you file a restraining order against your own daughter-in-law, you don't retreat. You prepare. I invited them under the pretense of a civil conversation. Kieran agreed without hesitation. Celine insisted on coming. They arrived mid-morning, walking up the drive as if they still owned the weekend rights to my house. Nothing in their demeanor suggested shame, no cameras, no fake inspections, no lawyer-reviewed letters could touch their sense of entitlement. Celine looked polished, as always, her calm curated like armor. Kieran's face told a different story, drawn restless, the look of someone caught between loyalty and truth. I opened the door and stepped aside. Come in. No hugs, no coffee. Just the sharp weight of silence trailing them as they entered. We sat in the living room. I chose the chair facing them, not beside them. They waited for me to speak first. I won't pretend trust still exists between us, I said. Too much has happened, but I'll say what needs to be said, and then we're finished. Kieran nodded his knee, bouncing as if he were bracing for impact. I turned to him. Do you remember the key I gave you when I first closed on this house? It was meant for visits, for family time. Not for appraisers, not for contractors, not for backroom conversations about turning my home into a revenue stream. His jaw tightened. I didn't know she was going that far, Mom. Maybe not, I said, but you let her speak for both of you. I shifted my gaze to Celine. Her face was unreadable, her posture perfect. I want both keys returned. Today. She gave a light laugh, sharp and dismissive. Corliss, really. After all the work we've put into this place, the weekends we sacrificed, the improvements we suggested, you were guests. I said, my voice steady. Not owners. Not partners. Guests. Her smile faltered, twisting into something colder. You're being dramatic. No, I answered, leaning forward. I'm being clear. Kieran reached into his pocket. He set a small brass key on the coffee table between us. The sound of metal against wood rang louder than it should have. My eyes stayed on Celine. She crossed one leg over the other, expression smooth. I seem to have misplaced mine. I'll send it when I find it. I didn't blink. Don't bother. The locks were changed weeks ago. That key in your purse doesn't open anything here. It never will again. For the first time, her mask slipped. A flicker of anger flashed before she recovered, but I'd seen it. Control gone in an instant. Kieran shifted in his seat, eyes darting between us. He looked as though he didn't recognize either woman before him, one reclaiming her house, the other losing her grip. I'm done pretending, I continued. From this day forward, there is no access, no keys, no assumptions. If you want to visit, it will be by my invitation in writing with set dates, and I will decide when you leave. This is absurd, Celine muttered, rising. You're cutting your own family out. No, I corrected. I'm protecting myself from people who confused access with ownership, and I'm making sure it never happens again. She glanced at Kieran, but he didn't defend her. Not this time. Without another word, she turned toward the door. He followed, shoulders slumped, the silence between them heavier than any argument could be. When the sound of their car faded down the gravel drive, I exhaled. The house felt lighter. I picked up Kieran's key from the table, closed my hand around it, and carried it to the drawer where I kept the others that no longer mattered. 3 days passed in silence. The kind of silence that felt rehearsed, as if they were collectively holding their breath, waiting for me to blink. Friday afternoon, my phone buzzed. Motion detected at the front entrance. I was sitting on the deck with a blanket, and my journal just starting to feel the rhythm of my old life returning. I opened the app. Celine. She stood on my porch, flanked by a man I didn't recognize. He carried a clipboard and a laser measuring device. She gestured toward the front window, then pointed to the roofline, talking with the smooth confidence of someone who believed she had every right to be there. My hands curled into fists. The restraining order hadn't expired. She was violating it openly on camera again. I called the police. While I waited, I turned up the volume on the app. I'm authorizing this on behalf of the family, Celine was saying. The restraining order is being handled. There's an agreement pending that gives us management oversight. The man hesitated. Ma'am, I was told this property was disputed. Are you listed on the deed? Celine didn't flinch. I manage the property with my husband. We're finalizing joint authority. She wasn't backing down. She was doubling down. The patrol car pulled up 15 minutes later, lights off but firm. I stayed on the line with dispatch until the officer stepped out. My camera feed caught it all the moment the officer identified himself, the moment Celine's entire posture changed. At first, she tried charm. That didn't work. Then confusion. Still no luck. Finally, she snapped. This is ridiculous, she said. We're trying to protect this house from mismanagement, from a woman who's clearly struggling with memory and judgment. The officer didn't waver. Ma'am, there is a court order in place. You are in violation. Please step away from the property. Celine's voice dropped into something icy and deliberate. Do you have any idea who I am? I do, the officer replied calmly. You're someone being cited. Again. She was escorted off the property. Not arrested, but warned. One more violation, and they wouldn't be so lenient. I sent the footage to my attorney that evening along with the audio. She didn't need to say much, just confirmed that we'd now documented a clear pattern of escalation. That night, Kieran called. I let it go to voicemail at first. Then I listened. Mom, I saw the footage. I don't know what to say. She didn't tell me. I had no idea she was going back out there. His voice cracked near the end. I'm starting to think I don't know her as well as I thought I did. I called him back the next morning. No lectures, no judgment. Just the truth. She stood on my porch, Kieran. Told a stranger she had authority over my home. She knew it was a lie, and she didn't care. He didn't argue. I'm sorry, he said. We agreed to meet just the two of us. No lawyers, no Celine. When he arrived, he looked different. Tired, yes, but less defended. Like something had broken loose. He sat across from me on the deck, hands wrapped around the coffee I poured him. I went through her emails, he said, and everything changed. Kieran sat across from me on the deck, eyes fixed on the coffee mug in his hands, like it held answers. His voice was quiet when he said it. I read everything. Her emails. The notes to the property manager. The contractor quotes with my name forged at the bottom. I didn't speak. I let the wind do the talking for a moment, letting it pass between us. She was lining up everything behind my back, he said. Preparing to list the house, sell partial shares to a couple of her investors under some shell LLC. It was never about helping you. Not even once. My stomach didn't twist. Not anymore. I had already felt the worst of it weeks ago. Now it was just confirmation. She used my name, Mom, he added, to get the appraisal, to initiate the fire inspection request. I thought I was the idiot who looked the other way. Turns out I wasn't even in the room. He took a breath, like it hurt to say what came next. I can't fix what she's done, but I want to take responsibility for what I allowed, and I want to be in your life again if there's room for that. I looked at him, then really looked at him, the lines at the corners of his eyes, the way his shoulders slumped just enough to tell me he hadn't been sleeping. There's always room, I said, but not if it's tied to ownership. Not if you still want the house. I don't, he said immediately. Not a square inch of it. I just want peace between us. I want something we can rebuild, not something we fight over. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded envelope. I talked to a mediator. Independent, neutral. Her name's Alice. She doesn't work for either of us. I thought maybe if you're willing, we could sit down. Go over everything. Just to get it all in the open. I hesitated. Not because I didn't want resolution, but because I wasn't sure what part of myself I'd have to reopen to get there. I'd sealed off so much just to survive the last few months. Still, I took the envelope. I'm not promising anything, I said, but I'll think about it. That's all I'm asking. He paused. And I'm not speaking to Celine about this. She doesn't know I'm here. She doesn't know I read her files. I've hired someone to start separating our finances. It's already in motion. There was grief in his eyes, but not just for me, for the life he thought he was building, for the woman he thought he'd married. She played all of us, he whispered. I just didn't want to see it. We sat in silence for a while, the ocean stretching before us like something endless and heavy. Before he left, he asked if he could walk through the house. Just once. No agenda. No photos. No discussions. I agreed. I followed behind him as he moved room to room. At the front door, he turned to me. Thank you for not changing everything, he said. Even when you could have. I wanted something to stay the same, I replied. He nodded, stepped out, and pulled the door closed behind him. This time, I didn't lock it, but I did check the cameras just in case. The final meeting took place in a quiet room, lined with thick carpet and soft lighting, the kind of space meant to make hard conversations feel less sharp. Kieran sat beside me, not across. That mattered more than I thought it would. The mediator Alice had her papers neatly arranged. Her voice was calm, but clear, every word weighted without being heavy. This agreement, she began, protects the current ownership and outlines future inheritance terms. All parties have reviewed the terms with their respective counsel. She slid the folder toward me. The top page bore my name. Not mine and Kieran's. Not mine and Celine's. Just mine. Corliss Avery, sole owner. The clause we fought for was in bold. At no point shall Celine Thief Hartman be entitled to any percentage privilege or access to the property located at Pelican Cove, whether through marriage, legal maneuvering, or familial association. It was the cleanest line I'd seen in months. Kieran signed first. His hand didn't shake. He didn't hesitate. When he passed the pen to me, his eyes met mine, not to pressure, but to reassure. There was no eagerness in his expression, only a quiet sort of relief. I signed. It was done. The house was mine again, on paper, and in spirit. Later that afternoon, we sat on the porch steps together, sipping coffee like we had 100 times before all of this began. He told me he'd moved out of the Meridian condo, that Celine had been served papers, and responded with a 10-page letter full of spin and self-pity. She's still trying to frame herself as the victim, he said. But she won't win this time. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. He pulled a folded sheet from his back pocket. I recognized the handwriting his. Not formal, not legal, just personal. It's for my file, he said, in case something happens to me. We didn't talk much after that. We just sat there as the sun dipped low behind the waves, watching the sky shift from gold to gray. He left just before dark. No drama, no long goodbyes. When the car pulled away, I didn't cry. I didn't celebrate either. Peace, when it finally came, was quiet. It didn't announce itself. It didn't wrap me in joy or sorrow. It just filled the house in a slow, still way, like fog rolling in without hurry. That night, I didn't check the cameras. I didn't need to. I turned off the porch light, locked the new deadbolt with a single click, and stood there in the entryway, listening. No footsteps, no whispers, no negotiations in the other room, just stillness. The beach house was mine, entirely. And in the morning, for the first time in months, I would wake up without having to brace myself. The news came in a text filed today. She knows it's final. Kieran didn't offer more, and I didn't press. He'd said what mattered. 2 weeks later, we met again. No fanfare. Just a knock at my door and the familiar face of my son, thinner, yes, older in the eyes, but steadier somehow, like something heavy had been unfastened from his chest. He didn't mention her name, and I didn't ask. But I saw the lines around his mouth tighten when I offered coffee, the same kind she used to criticize for being too bitter. He accepted without comment. We sat on the deck in silence, listening to the tide slosh against the sand. He let the breeze speak for him for a while, before finally saying, "She's still denying everything." I nodded. I expected she would. She said I betrayed her, that I let you poison me. His hands were wrapped around the mug, but he wasn't drinking. But it wasn't poison. It was clarity. Just clarity that took too long. I didn't say I'd known all along. I didn't remind him how many times he'd chosen silence when I needed his voice. That kind of thing might be true, but it doesn't help people come back. And I wanted him back. Instead, I said, sometimes the hardest thing to forgive isn't the betrayal. It's that we let it happen. His eyes watered, but he didn't look away. She hated that house, he whispered. Said it made you too independent. Said it made me soft. I could have told him all the things she'd really hated. The way I never gave her full control. The way I didn't disappear. But I let him have that thought for himself. I don't want to be soft, he added, but I don't want to be cruel either. I think I got lost trying to be neither. We talked about other things after that. His work, his plan to rent a small place on the other side of town. Nothing fancy. Just something with light, something quiet. He didn't ask to stay with me. And I was grateful for that. Not because I didn't love him, but because I could tell he finally understood what space meant, what respect looked like in practice. Before he left that evening, he walked down to the water shoes, in hand trousers rolled up like he used to when he was little. I watched him from the porch, the man I raised trying to find his footing again, not as Celine's husband, not as someone's compromise, but as himself. He came back up sand, clinging to his feet, smile faint but real. Next weekend, he said. Dinner here, I replied. Of course, he said. Always here. He drove off just as the sun dipped beneath the line of the water, and I stayed outside long after the engine faded. Healing, I'd learned, doesn't always come with apologies. Sometimes it arrives slowly, one visit at a time, in the shape of someone sitting quietly beside you and not needing to be forgiven, just witnessed. Inside, I tidied the table, set aside an extra mug, and folded the small note he'd left behind, just a scrap of paper tucked near the coffee jar. Thank you for holding the line, even when I didn't deserve it. That night, the breeze came through the window like a sigh, not of exhaustion, but of something leaving for good, something I didn't need to carry anymore. And in that space, something else began to return. Not just peace, something gentler, warmer. Home. The breeze came in from the water that morning, strong enough to lift the corners of the porch rug and stir the wind chimes above my door. It smelled like salt and sunlight, like everything familiar and everything free. I sat on the deck with my coffee wrapped in the old shawl my mother crocheted decades ago. The house behind me was still. No tension humming beneath its walls. No footsteps I didn't trust. No voices pretending to be polite while plotting the next move. Just wood, air, light. Mine. Kieran arrived a little past noon. He didn't knock anymore, just gave a gentle call from the edge of the driveway. A habit we'd rebuilt together. Permission asked, not assumed. He carried a bag of fresh pastries and a look in his eyes I hadn't seen in years, peace. And beside him, a woman I didn't recognize. She was soft-spoken, with hair tied back and hands tucked into the sleeves of a worn cardigan. Not flashy, not polished, but warm in a way that felt real. He introduced her as Claire, a friend. Just getting to know each other, he said, not defensive, just honest. I nodded and welcomed her in. We ate lunch on the porch, salmon sandwiches, iced tea, a bowl of sliced apples I'd prepped out of habit. The conversation was easy. No mentions of Celine. No heavy rewrites of the past. Just laughter in the right places and silence where it belonged. After they left, I lingered. The ocean stretched wide before me, unbothered, unchanging, and I thought about what this house had witnessed. Years of holiday meals, late-night arguments, quiet mornings with books on the sunlit floor. It had carried me through the grief of losing my parents, the joy of raising a son, the ache of being erased, and the slow, hard work of returning to myself. So much had been taken from me in small, measured ways. Trust, autonomy, dignity. And then, finally, the one thing I never thought they'd reach for my sense of safety. But I had taken it back. Not with a scream, not with revenge, with a lock and a key. The tide was coming in. I waded ankle deep and let the water run over my feet. When I turned back toward the house, the sun caught on the new brass lock above the doorknob. It shone like something just installed, something untouched. The house stood behind it, still mine, still standing. Inside, the floors creaked softly under my steps. I brewed a second cup of coffee, sat at the table facing the sea. and I finally let myself exhale. Not in fear, not in defense, but in return. Because peace hadn't arrived like a gift. It had been earned. One boundary, one decision, one key at a time.